So, hello, day 3 in paradise, and for today's mini lecture I'm going to talk about post EQ. So that's equalization after the clipping, after distortion. It's just like a finishing EQ, and this is where we most traditionally use it. When you think of your treble, mid and bass controls in your amp, they're a type of post EQ. But I think as guitarists, we're often sold very short on our EQs and tone controls. We're sort of given, oh, you can have treble and bass, or you can have treble, mid and bass, or, you know, if we're really pushing our luck, we might get like a 5-band graphic or something, and that's, ooh. Whereas in the real audio world, there are absolutely thousands of variations of EQs. They are so different and so powerful. Recording studios spend thousands of pounds on one EQ, and yet we're just shorted and we're told, here, have this terrible passive EQ in an amp that just doesn't really do much. So the advantage of a passive EQ, and why you see them in amplifiers so much, is, well, they're cheap. There's a running theme here, isn't there? Simple to implement, but also you can't really get them wrong. So they've taken away a lot of control from you guys. They've taken away your chance to decide how things sound in order to give their amplifier a characteristic. So, you know, Fender sounds like a Fender, and Marshall sounds like a Marshall, and no matter where you put those knobs on that amp, it still sounds like a Marshall. But we have a few different ways out of that, like the graphic EQs, like classic Boss 7 bands and MXR 10 bands, and they're all right, but that's only one type of EQ again. And the thing is, some EQs inherently sound nice, and other EQs inherently sound harsh, and some sound sharp and specific. Some EQs are good for surgical changes, for taking out a little bit of note, and others are good for a sweeping wide range. And again, we're treated like idiots. Here's your EQ. 3 bands, 2 bands, 4 bands. Like that actually is all there is to it. And it offends me a little bit. So I'm going to run over a couple of the different types of EQ you can have here, so you can understand what you're looking at. So first of all, your passive EQ. Pretty much what every amplifier has. They only cut. That's the first thing, because there's no parts going on. There's no active parts, there's no op amps, there's no chips, no boosts. So all they're really doing is adding a simple passive filter, which is just like a couple of parts, and they suck. So you can suck some treble out, which is great because it gets less harsh. You can suck some bass out because it's great because it gets less flabby. And you can suck some mids out. Not very well, I might add, but it gives you a little bit of a scoop, which is all we're really looking for. So those are the 3 main things. Sorry again. Your graphic EQ is quite a simple piece of kit to make. It uses something called a gyrator, and you can actually do a dirty cheap gyrator with a transistor, which is pretty nasty, and again, a lot of them do that. Cheap parts count. But once we break away from this into the realm of really cool EQs, parametrics and semi-parametrics, but also specific design ideas, then the whole world opens up. So, for example, we have a famous mixing desk called the DDA Q series, which is used in a lot of live sound, and it has an amazing, rich, sweet sound. I've just made some of these from my friend in a recording studio, and he's in love with them because at the top end is so alive and so clear, and that's because of this, the way the circuit is. It makes it really broad and wide, and really I can't explain to you all the hundreds of different circuits, because there are hundreds. I'm just sort of saying to you guys, you are being cheated. I'm sorry, you are. So in the Grand Classic, you're not being cheated. Guess what I've used for the treble control? Yes, I've used this DDAQ Classic Mixing Desk series. The same thing I'm putting in these EQs that I'm selling for 350, 400 quid. I'm putting in a pedal that's a fraction of the price, and they're just EQs. That's all they do. And that gives you this wonderful open tone because I'm selecting this particular sort of EQ. For your mid-range, I'm using a more traditional parametric style EQ. It's a little bit like a gyrator. It's a little bit like the graphic EQ, if you like. So it has a narrower band, it's more precise and gets to the heart of the matter. So you have a lovely tight, precise EQ. For the 2 switches that I've got on there, the deep and the, did I call it core switch? They're again using a kind of DDA style wide band broad EQ to give you a gentle boost over a wide range of frequencies. And so really, what I'm saying here is EQ is not EQ. And this is a great subject to dive into. And I think if you want to be a sonic explorer of your equipment, step away from the pedal EQs right now. Start thinking of your distortions and overdrives in terms of they're going to generate, like we've said in the last two videos, the harmonic content. Don't think of them in terms of EQ. Because one of my biggest gripes with pedal EQs is, generally speaking, you get a treble and bass because of limited controls, and that EQ is copied straight off a hi-fi, and it is just a bad EQ for a pedal. So the hi-fi is designed to say we'll boost everything below a certain frequency and call it bass, not a specific range, just here and all below or here and all above. And in a hi-fi, that's great, because what we're saying is we want here and all below, so that's going to give us a thick, a lot of depth, all the subwoofer, the kick drum, that kind of cinema sound. Or we want all the trebles, we want all the cymbals, the air. But neither of them's any use to a guitar, because we're not interested in bass guitar frequencies and we're not interested in cymbal frequencies. So all they do is they take this standard EQ and they move the treble down a bit and they move the bass up a bit, and that's okay, it affects those frequencies, but now it affects everything else. So you boost the treble and you get what you're looking for, you get that clarity you're looking for, but then you also get the harshness and the hiss and the things you don't want, because you're boosting. So what you want for a guitar is basically like a semi-parametric, a range of frequencies, and you don't get that when they do it. And again, some of the mid controls I've seen are just passive mids, different things. Step away from the step away from the pedal EQs. Have a look at studio EQs. There's absolutely no reason you can't run a guitar level signal through it. It'll just be a tiny bit less signal to noise, it's like worse signal to noise ratio, a little bit more noise, but those pieces of kit are so good, they're already 1,000 times better than a pedal that you will not notice it, they'll just be better. And that's what you're getting in the Grand Classic, really. You're getting, especially those two post EQs, you're getting the mid-range, which is a narrow, tight EQ, you're getting the treble, which is a wider, airy, lifting EQ, and you're getting the two switches, which are completely active EQs. They're not just simple passive filters like a real pedal. Those are full-on active EQs, and theoretically, if there was enough space on the front, I could put a pot in each of them for you just by swapping out a resistor. So there you go. I hope that's interesting. I hope that helps you think differently, and possibly in future I might even make a pedal in this vein myself that uses some studio grade EQs for you guys, because you can do so much with a post EQ. Don't be hindered by what's out there, and do get on board with the Grand Classic. Oh, one last thing before I go. Why no bass control in the Grand Classic? Well, in terms of guitar tonal frequencies, it's the least useful one. You know, that treble and bass thing I was saying they put in straight off a hi-fi, we don't really need it. I mean, the bass guitar's doing the bass. What we want, our most important frequencies are mids and upper mids, and we know that really, so let's cater to that. Cool. See you soon. I'm off to enjoy this beer and go fall into a pool somewhere.